We are live, back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Steph. I'm here with the Oracle, the GOAT, the man himself, Alex Lotz. And all I have to say is it feels phenomenal to be back in this chair on a live broadcast with you, about to pop off with some Dynasty takes. This has been for me one of the most fun seasons. I don't know about you, Alex, but how hype are you to get into this thing today?
I mean, it does feel weird to be back. It's almost like I forgot how a computer works, like trying to get set up for this. I'm like, I still don't even know. Like, I don't even know how we can see how many people are in here. I got the chat pulled up, which is great. You'll notice I'm rocking just the chill, casual mic today. Couldn't even find my mic setup, but we just had to get back to it. I mean, it's been over a year. It's been a fun season. Our Discord is still popping off. And honestly, like, for those of you that are joining, that have been with us in the Discord the whole time, for those of you that might have found us on YouTube, we're Steph and Alex. We had this podcast, show, YouTube channel, whatever you want to call it, talking about everything for a couple years. Life came at us, new jobs, family, new moves, things like that. But after about a year and a half, we're getting back after it. And honestly, like, the thing that brought us back here was the Discord. We have a great community that's held strong the whole time, just talking about everything from dynasty moves to redraft trades, literally talking any sports news. We got live game chats. We get voice chats that get popping off in there too. So that Discord community is what's brought us back here today. So thank you. You know who you are. But if you're not in there, like, get in there. It's a blast. We got a great crew. And Steph, it's good to be back like we never left.
So I'm just itching right now to start dropping takes. I have a lot of strong opinions on football, just in general, about the game, about players, about dynasty, redraft takes, trades that I've seen that have happened recently. I want to start with this, Alex, and by all means, hit us in the chat, boys, if you have any questions on certain players you want us to break down. I got a couple highlighted here. A lot of what we want to talk about today are guys that have moved up and down in the dynasty rankings, specifically rookies and sophomore players. It's an insane shift we've seen in that sophomore class that I'm excited to dive into. But who have you bought recently, Alex? Whether it's on your contending rosters, whether it's in your redraft leagues, a guy that you think is going to have a strong end of the season. I know you've made a lot of deals out there. You and I have had some deals recently that I'd love to dive into. But are any top of mind right now, like a player that you've just been buying everywhere or selling everywhere?
Yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, like, I've got a couple great teams, great rosters right now, but I have a couple where I was kind of like hanging in the middle of these leagues and I had to make a decision. Do I want to rebuild or do I want to go for it? So most of my moves have actually been selling some of these rookies and sophomores, especially when I think about the receivers. I have a lot of Jaden Reed, a lot of Josh Downs, a lot of Rashee Rice. And these are guys that have flashed, that look great, and I want them on my rosters, but I know there are teams out there, and I'm sure we'll talk about those guys as we get into the conversation today. But like, I'm trying to capitalize and get some veterans. So the biggest trade that comes to mind, stuff that I'm pumped about, was in a best ball league or in together. And I took a different approach this year. The startup was just this past offseason. I said, what would happen if instead of going for these peak upside guys, I just took as many guys that might score points every single week. So I did a lot of trading back. I ended up with honestly a lot of super mid players like David Montgomery on my roster, Alexander Madison on my roster, like guys that aren't really exciting. And transparently, it hasn't been the best strategy. So lesson learned, but I needed some upside on this team. I had CJ Stroud, you had Tyreek Hill, and you're looking for like a quick rebuild. So we pulled off a mega deal. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I think offhand it was, I gave you a 2024 first, CJ Stroud, Jaden Reed, and I think like a future second. And I got back Tyreek Hill, Dak Prescott, and Chris Godwin. So a mega trade, really leaning into some wide receiver upside with Tyreek Hill and Chris Godwin, and really selling on CJ Stroud. I think he is legit, but his value honestly doesn't have much higher that it can climb. So kind of like capitalizing on that value and hoping that Dak can just hold out for a couple of years. So right now I'm in this spot in my leagues where I'm just trying to contend. I'm trying to push. But fortunately, I have some of these first and second year receivers specifically that have flashed enough to where I can make some of those moves. So it's been fun.
And here's the full deal for all of you taking notes at home. I traded Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Dak Prescott, and Jerick McKinnon Keep in mind, this is a best ball league. I actually think McKinnon is kind of interesting in a best ball format. He will make your lineup, I guarantee you, at least once or twice before the year's over, just with some of those touchdown games that the Mahomes boys get into. And then I acquired a 2024 first, a 2025 second, a 2026 second, which I know you threw in there to get the deal done. That feels kind of nice. As well as CJ Stroud, Jaden Reed, and you threw in Evan Hull to fill in that IR spot for me. So it was a rebuild move for me. I took a certain approach. It didn't work in the startup. Tried to go a nice balance between win now and contend, but all my contention pieces just kind of fell off. Austin Eckler hasn't done much this year. There are a couple other kind of older names. Justin Jefferson's on that roster. He's on IR now. So everything just kind of went wrong. So I had to rebuild on the fly. Alex, I want to throw one at you that I pulled off recently in one of our leagues. Shout out to our boy Phil the Void, one of the OGs of Double Move Sports. I'm going full rebuild on a roster where I actually went all into contend. So I had a lot of pieces like I bought Devontae Adams in the offseason with Jimmy Garoppolo for a little stack there at a super flex league. I had DeAndre Swift on that roster. I have Josh Allen as well. And what I learned is just to not overextend for a stud QB. I had the opportunity to buy Josh Allen, but I went way too aggressive. I gave up future draft capital. I gave up Chris Olave, and that deal in my roster has been all the worse for it. I was banking on guys like Rashad Bateman being able to slide into my flex spot. That has not worked out at all. So I said, you know what? I need to rebuild. There's some contending teams in this league that look pretty strong. They're obviously going to want DeAndre Swift. They're obviously going to want Josh Allen. They're going to want Devontae Adams, guys that I really don't want on my roster because they're going to put up points this year, and they're on the descending side of their dynasty value as far as their career goes. But I sent away Jimmy G, Adams, Josh Allen, and Swift. I got back Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, Hollywood Brown, a first and a second in 2024. So draft capital, 2 quarterbacks that are young. And Alex, that actually brings me to one of the topics that we need to hit on today, which is Kyler Murray. What's the approach to him in Dynasty? I feel like it's so narrative based right now with what I see online about Kyler. It's, he's still playing Call of Duty, so the Cardinals hate him. Oh, they brought in the new coach. The new coach hates him. But then we see reports he could potentially play as soon as week 10 this year. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy that on my rebuilding rosters, I'm absolutely buying in all formats.
He's a buy. And honestly, like at this point, I mean, we might be late to the game. The buy window could be over. And I was on the flip side of this. I have a contending team where my quarterback spot needed some help. Kyler was on that roster, been, riding his good performances over the last couple of years. And I had him on the trade block. I was like, look, if someone can give me a streamer level quarterback plus something, like a Kirk Cousins plus something, I'm willing to move off Kyler just to get that in my lineup and maybe recoup some value. But recently, of course, the interest has been ticking up since the news, and I'm like really hesitant to want to trade him. I've held him this long. The lineup still is going to be a playoff lineup. It's going to be a contender. So for me, like if I have Kyler Murray, it's been a perfect time to buy. I think maybe you still have a small window left as there's some uncertainty. But the truth is, if you can play into the narrative that he's going to be off the Cardinals, they don't like him, they want to go a different direction, like that's fine. Because if Kyler Murray's not starting for the Cardinals, he's going to be starting somewhere else in the NFL. And I think with what he gives you on the ground, obviously the hope would be that he's in a pass-heavy system. But I still think he's going to be one of those premium dynasty assets. And I think his floor is giving you like a QB 12 performance on a season. So if I can get him to be my second quarterback on a dynasty roster, I'm stoked. And I think he might actually be a sneaky buy for contenders and rebuilding teams right now. Rebuild, obviously, the hope is you lean into. He's out a couple more weeks. You get him back next season. But for a contender, if you have a pretty questionable second quarterback spot, you're rolling out Brock Purdy, you got Geno Smith, you're just kind of like biting the bullet to get by. He could be a really interesting upside play if you have some assets, some younger players, some future picks that you can give up to get that deal done. So I'm with you, Steph. I think the consensus is, it's rising because he's getting closer to being on the field, but I think he's really undervalued right now, and he's been undervalued, but it's finally starting to catch up now that the hype is starting to build again.
100% agree. And what's interesting with Kyler is the contract situation. I think a lot of people have tried to read into the contracts, and honestly, the contract for Kyler Murray is kind of confusing. There's a lot of stipulations where if he's on the roster, future years get guaranteed, right? So if he's on the roster for the Cardinals at the start of 2024, his 2025 salary becomes fully guaranteed, something like that. It's really weird, really complicated contract, but long story short, if he's healthy and he can play, I think Arizona sticks with him. I think all that, the narratives around some of the changes that they've made in Arizona, I think are overblown. And honestly, if you look at the skill position players for Arizona, they're not that bad. You've seen Josh Dobbs do pretty well this year. So I'm excited for Kyler when he comes back. He'll have a proper outside X receiver with Michael Wilson. Really excited for him. I think he's a guy that we can talk about today when we get into some of the rookies. Hollywood Brown continuing to show that he is a target magnet. Doesn't matter about size right now, as we're seeing from Josh Downs, like we're seeing from Jordan Addison, who just popped off on Monday night. I'm so over these size issues. Like Devonta Smith was the final nail in the coffin for all the people that fade receivers just because they're under 180 pounds or whatever threshold they want to come up with. Good players are good. If they can do it in college, I think they'll be able to do it in the league, regardless of their size, regardless of their speed, regardless of their testing. Because I remember people telling me Jordan Addison was going to be trash because he ran a 4.5 and he was small. Meanwhile, he's putting up wide receiver 1, big boom performances. But back to Kyler, there's a lot that I want to see towards the end of this year, but I think he's a guy whose value could skyrocket. So in a lot of cases, if you can, he's a guy I want to hold on to and then even sell higher once he comes back and looks good as that elite tier asset. If somebody thinks they're getting, a top 3 quarterback, top 5 QB, which we probably won't see with, the Josh Allen, Mahomes, Jalen Hurts tier. Even Lamar Jackson, you could throw into that tier. He's flirting with that right now. But Alex, who else have you bought this year? That's pretty exciting. Or have you sold?
Yeah, let's see. I'm starting to click through some of my rosters here. I've bought some Mark Andrews. I think he's a veteran player that's interesting. He had a really disappointing start to the season. He started to come on lately. And the thing about Mark Andrews is he's still only 28 years old. There's all this hype right now about these young tight ends, obviously. Now that Knox is out, Kincaid is getting some hype. Sam Laporta is getting hype. And I still think if you can find a guy like a Mark Andrews in tight end premium, he's an interesting asset. So again, that's like a prime contender move. ETN was one of my biggest buys of the offseason, and that's been just an absolute smash. Steph, I know you could go on for hours about your ETN over Najee Harris takes. So I'll throw you a bone there. But yeah, ETN has been phenomenal. And I've really just been trying to sell some of these super mediocre assets. Rashad White was a big sell for me coming into the year and early on. Najee Harris as well. It does look like we have some questions in the chat about Najee that we'll get to, but just these inefficient running backs that can be replaced just don't really have a place on rosters. And I know there's this volume discussion, both Najee and Rashad White are holding on due to volume. Dameon Pierce didn't have a lot of him in the first place, but another running back that's holding on because of volume. I think what it comes down to is your whole previous monologue about good players are good, and we got to throw some of these size conversations out the window. I think the same thing can go for players that have perceived volume. We have to be honest with ourselves. Najee Harris has been inefficient for years. Alexander Mattison has been inefficient. Rashad White was pretty inefficient, showed flashes, but we have to tell ourselves, if there's any hint of competition in these backfields, we have to be aware that the volume conversation only matters if that player continues to be good. And when we look at Jaylen Warren, even Devin Singletary, I know he's not a dynasty really relevant name, but when we just look at the NFL field, we have to recognize that good players are going to get on the field. And if you don't produce and you don't have draft capital tied up, and you don't have a big contract, it's going to be pretty easy for you to get benched or lose your job. So yeah, Steph,
the volume, it can't be what you rely on in Dynasty. It just can't. You have to value the efficiency way more. And that's what we love to see with rookies, is that they're showing efficiency on limited touches. That's why Marvin Mims has been a guy that we've talked about in the Discord a lot as that 2024 play, because in his limited usage, he has been efficient. We were pounding the table for Rashee Rice. That's been a guy I've been acquiring in a lot of redraft formats, and now that's finally hitting because he's getting on the field more. In his limited usage, he was getting 40-50% route participation early on in the year, but he was still leading the team in targets in certain games, leading the team in receiving yards in certain games, getting a couple touchdowns here and there. It was if they start to use this guy at all, he's going to be great. And what do you know? This last weekend, 17 fantasy points, gets the touchdown, looked like the best receiver out there, either with Mecole Hardman coming back to the Chiefs. So, yeah, I think that efficiency is what you have to look at. And we look at a guy like Najee. We knew this kind of coming in to when he was drafted. We said he's an older prospect. You're going to be wanting to get out of this guy, in only a couple seasons. And we're at that tipping point where if you didn't get out, you're kind of stuck holding the bag on him. He's on pace for his career worst in rushing attempts, and the targets are gone. And I think that's the killer. That's the difference between a Najee and a Ramondre Stevenson, is that they've replaced Najee's passing workload with Jalen Warren, and the other receivers have ascended. I definitely want to take some victory laps on my George Pickens takes that I dropped 2 years ago, and was taking. Everyone told me I'm way too ahead of consensus on George Pickens, who's phenomenal now. But for like Ramondre Stevenson, they don't have that pass catching back, and even they might bring in a guy like whoever it is, Ty Montgomery. They had Pierre Strong to start the year. People worried about them. Ramondre's that good as a receiver and commanding targets, and has done it consistently enough, in my opinion, that he can hold on a lot more compared to a guy like Najee, even though both of them are past the age apex. They're kind of these bigger grinder backs on the ground. Najee's lost all that passing work, hasn't looked explosive. So, Alex, I want to talk to you about some of these rookies. There's a lot of names that we can dive into, but let's start with the QBs. Let's just go through all the rookie quarterbacks, or at least the big three, and talk about how their values have changed. Let's start with Anthony Richardson as our resident Colts homer. I know you have some thoughts on him.
Richardson is a buy. He's a huge buy for me. I mean, especially if you're a rebuilding team, you have your own draft pick, buy Anthony Richardson, because then you get a premium player and a premium asset that's not actually helping you win games and helping you get a better pick for next season. And it's just like, I want to say this before we get too far into this topic, is like, if you want to rebuild, yes, picks matter. Yes, young players matter. But especially if you have your own draft picks on your roster, buying injured players that aren't, their knee just exploded and everything is gone, injuries, is such a good way to effectively rebuild, because the players obviously are at a discount for this season. It helps you lose games because your starting lineup is weaker every week. And when those players come back at full strength, you're really set up for success. So A-Rich looks like everything we wanted to see. I think for the Colts this season, I'm disappointed that he's not going to get the development time. And I think the only knock on him right now, especially as a dynasty asset, is injury risk. Before the shoulder, he left 2 previous games with injuries. I think it was a concussion. He had another minor injury where he left late against Jacksonville early on in the season. So that's concerning for sure, especially with the big, physical way that he plays. And aside from injury, there was a lot to like this season. As a passer, was much more efficient and looked a lot more comfortable than expected. He looked phenomenal and elite as a rusher. He actually looks right now like he's giving you a lot more than a Jalen Hurts will on the ground. Like, I know coming in, it was like, hey, if he gives you Jalen Hurts level rushing upside, then he's going to be what we want in Dynasty. But honestly, like, yes, Jalen Hurts has the tush push and he's going to get a ton of touchdowns. But A-Rich, as far as yardage goes and speed goes and just play in the open field, looked fantastic. So I think he's a buy. I think in a small sample this year, it kind of confirmed what we were hoping for on the field in terms of what his upside could be. But if you are someone that believes in injuries, I know we got a lot of, self-declared injury experts in our Discord. But if you're someone that likes to fade that, then that's up to you and you don't have to take the risk. But for me, I'm shooting for upside in Dynasty, and I think A-Rich is an easy buy.
Yeah, 100%. I think with him too, what you're going to hear, I can almost guarantee it, at some point between now and the start of next season, you're going to hear about how, there's going to be all this scar tissue and A-Rich's shoulder, and he's going to get Cam Newton and all this kind of stuff. And is there a risk that happens? Sure. But if you've watched any amount of Anthony Richardson play, he has arm strength to burn. He has athleticism to burn. Even 80% of what he was showing, like, my mind was blown about how that ball just flies out of his hands. And there were games, if you look at week 2 at Houston, he only played 32% of snaps. That was the game where he gave you the 2 rushing touchdowns. But he'd only had 3 rushing attempts, and 2 of them were goal line pushes to get the touchdowns there. So, like, he was showing in that game, was 6 for 10 for 56 yards through the air. Didn't really need to do a ton on the ground. So I think there was enough flashes with his arm as well where you say, hey, this guy can hold a starting job, or at least the NFL will perceive him to be a guy who holds down a starting job for a long time. So definitely a guy that if you see that buy window on Anthony Richardson, if there's a contender that happened to have him, you've probably already bought him by now, or you got him in your rookie draft, but definitely a buy. CJ Stroud, Alex, should we victory lap CJ Stroud over Bryce Young?
I hate victory lapping too early, but I mean, compared to Bryce Young through what has it been, 7-8 weeks, like it's been night and day. And we'll talk about Stroud first. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal. Obviously in Houston with a shoddy offensive line with questionable weapons, like he has looked and showed that he is a elite asset in the NFL. And honestly, like he gives me a lot of Herbert rookie season vibes where, yes, in like a redraft sense, there's a lot of up and down happening with CJ Stroud. He still might make a mental error here and there. He might have a game where his completion percentage is a little bit low. But at the end of the day, he is pushing the ball down the field. He is throwing guys open. He is making good decisions. And I think he broke the record for the most pass attempts to start a career without an interception. So even in a questionable situation in Houston, he's looked incredible. And I think there's only progress for him moving forward when we think about not only his development as a player, when we think about the weapons that they could bring in to help support him in Houston. And so Stroud, I mean, it's been phenomenal in Dynasty. He's easily a top 10 quarterback. I think he's right behind the Joe Burrow tier right now. Like I'd put Stroud in the same tier as a Trevor Lawrence today, which is definitely a jump from where he was before the season. So for Stroud, I think it's phenomenal. And I'll let you weigh in here before we move over to Bryce Young, because a little bit of a different story there.
I think you nailed it, man. Top 10 quarterback in Dynasty, CJ Stroud. I would put him, honestly, I think I'd put him above Trevor Lawrence just because of what he's shown earlier in his career. Yes, we can give Trevor the mulligan with the Urban Meyer year, but he's never done what CJ Stroud's done for any reasonable stretch of time, where you have Stroud coming in for his first 5 weeks without an interception, being efficient, looking great. It was interesting. The move that was not talked about, which some sharps should have seen through this, but I never saw anybody talk about this, was the Texans offensive coordinator coming from was it San Francisco or one of those Shanahan? Yeah, 6 seasons with the 49ers. Right? They brought in Bobby Sloan. Now, I hate glorifying coaches, but I think the thing we could have seen from that, and I'm not saying, Stroud is great. Stroud would have been great no matter what offense coordinator they put back there. I think if people, if the Texans offense played out like people thought, where, hey, they have Dameon Pierce, they're going to play hard defense. It's going to be a defensive first team, heavy run game, and they're going to try to protect CJ Stroud. I think if we looked at that offensive coordinator signing, there were some signs that say, hey, maybe this offense is going to look completely different. Maybe they're going to be more like a San Francisco offense, which would just be, high efficiency and a great run game. It's actually been the opposite. The run game really hasn't been able to get going until they've asked Stroud to do more, and he's delivered. Continuing to show that, just like we've said all the time, just because a guy went to a certain school doesn't mean he can't break out, doesn't mean he's not a good prospect. I'm so tired of the Ohio State QBs narrative. Thankfully, that's over with Fields looking great for a couple weeks before he went out. And obviously we know what Fields did last year for us in fantasy, winning me and others leagues. But same thing when we talk about like guys like, Quentin Johnston, where it's like, oh, Jalen Reagor busted at TCU, QJ went to TCU, so he's going to bust. So some of that helmet scouting can get you in trouble. Same thing with the Alabama wide receivers. So be careful with some of that when you do that helmet scouting, but super excited for Stroud. I think we nailed it with his dynasty value right now. What would you pay for CJ Stroud? Would it be 2 firsts or like a 24 and a 25 first, a first and a second?
I mean, honestly, yeah, I'd pay a mid to late 24 and 25 first for sure. When I think about this 2024 class, like I might be willing to give an early 2024 first. There's a lot of hype around the class. There's Caleb Williams, Drake May. There's a lot of quarterbacks in this class. But the thing is, like, if those guys end up being what we've seen from CJ Stroud through 7 games, you'd be stoked. So if I can just guarantee that I already have that on my roster, especially if it looks like it might be somewhere in that 2 to 5 range and you don't know where it would land, I'd be willing to do that. So I think it's 2 mid to late first for sure. Might even be willing to pay more in the right situation.
Well, we talked about that Stroud deal at the start of the show that we did, right? And I was, giving up Tyreek Hill to get that deal done.
Best ball.
So,
yeah,
that's what we're talking about here. And shout out to ML in the chat. Kyler plus Hollywood stack could be sneaky awesome in the playoffs. 100% agree. I'll give you another sneaky stack, especially in redraft. CJ Stroud playoff schedule, he plays Tennessee twice, week 15, week 17. He does have Cleveland at home, week 16. I'm fine for him to probably sit in there. But if you're one of those teams that's like grinding through Geno and Brock Purdy and all these teams, go acquire Stroud on the cheap if you can. At some point, he's probably going to have some lower scoring games. And you kind of already saw that 14 and 15 fantasy points the last 2 weeks for CJ Stroud. Then he just had the bye week, but has a beautiful schedule the rest of the way. So I'll throw Stroud in there as another sneaky playoff team. And you can stack him with the guy that I want to talk about next, Alex. One of the biggest surprises for me this year has been Tank Dell.
Wait. We're going to talk Bryce Young real quick.
Oh, yeah.
We can be quick here. I do want to say one thing about Bryce Young.
No, there's a lot to say about Bryce. We might be stuck on this for the next
I was fading Bryce Young. I was hoping he'd be good. Still has a chance to be good, by all means. Still has a chance to be good. But I faded him because of his size. I just didn't believe that he could get it done and compensate for the lack of physical tools at the quarterback spot. And I think through, the first 6 games that he's played, we've seen that. And Steph, I put this in the Discord a couple weeks ago, a blind comparison here between 2 players. Player A, 61% completions, 182 yards a game, 6.1 average, 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So pretty bad. Player B, 64% completions, 188 yards a game, 5.2 average, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So pretty much exactly the same. Player A is Zach Wilson this season. Player B is Bryce Young. So legitimately through the first 7 weeks of this year, Zach Wilson, you're getting out of Bryce Young what the Jets are getting out of Zach Wilson. I know one is a rookie and one is in his 3rd season now. So there's development time, et cetera, that comes into play. But Bryce Young has been miserable. He's not throwing the ball down the field. I know there's a conversation that can be had around, his weapons aren't good enough, or the offensive line is bad, or the system is bad. But CJ Stroud has the same exact argument that could be made for him. And in Carolina, Adam Thielen's been great. He's been this underneath monster. And I think some of that's because Bryce Young's just not pushing the ball down the field to his DJ Chark, to his Jonathan Mingo that's in the lineup. And so Young has gotten sacked a lot. He's been a turnover machine, and it's just been ugly to watch, quite frankly. And even in some of these garbage time, shootout games, we're still not really seeing those flashes that we want to see. So Bryce Young, to me, was a fade before the draft. Honestly, is even more of a fade now. I'd be willing to go ahead and sell, even with the value suppressed, if you ended up with him on any of your rosters. But I'm really concerned about what his outlook could be. And for me, coming in, knowing his size and knowing his lack of, he's quick, but he doesn't have the size to run. He's not as fast as a Kyler. He's not big. He's not going to run the ball a ton. So to be a dynasty elite asset at quarterback, he has to be having these 40 touchdown seasons, 4,500 to 5,000 yards, like we're seeing from Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, et cetera. And I just don't think that's in the cards for Bryce Young anytime soon.
The really damning thing for me on Young, and I was definitely higher on Young than you were. I thought, hey, if there's a guy to gamble on who's undersized, it's Bryce Young, who was incredibly efficient in college, just dominant, Heisman winner, all this stuff, right? All the stuff that you want from a college resume. Bryce Young had that, and then he goes 101, so you kind of chase that a little bit as well, that maybe these GMs know something that we don't, which that's my biggest takeaway from this year. These GMs don't know anything, Alex. I'm like almost done with draft capital completely because of how many guys that we've seen fall to day 3. We knew they were good in college. They looked great. They tested well. They passed every other test that we could put in front of them. And we're like, this guy's good. I don't know why he's falling to day 3. I'm betting on those guys a lot more in the future because I'm tired of this horrible draft capital nonsense. But with Bryce Young as well, it's the situation. Tough situation that he's in where he's asked to be a game manager, but there's not really much of a game for him to manage. So it's just tough situations all around, horrible O-lines, adding
don't have a first this year.
And that's really, really tough. And I'll tell you, here's the really damning thing on Bryce. This is what I was going to say earlier. When they sat him week 3 off of a phantom ankle injury, that to me was like, okay, this is a problem. Either they saw something the first 2 weeks that they were like, hey, we got to get this kid's mind right. Maybe Bryce was just feeling like he was seeing ghosts out there and they wanted to stop the bleeding. Something was wrong because he had that phantom injury. They asked him about it post-game, and he just kind of, it gave you the most vague non-answer about what actually happened on the injury. There was no play where he was taken off the field. He wasn't down. He never grabbed his ankle. Something weird happened where they wanted to sit Bryce Young for a week and let Andy Dalton obviously go nuts against Seattle. Of course, when Andy Dalton steps in, he does well in that same situation. But yeah, just disgusting all around. But seeing that approach that they took to him sitting him in week 3 for seemingly no reason, that was scary. That was damning. That's like, get out, sell him for a second. You got to get out now because you can tell the way the team realizes what's going on. I think they are self-aware. Maybe not the owner.
You can trade Bryce Young for a first, even if it's in 2025. I still think you can find somebody.
Smash that.
And this week 8, we get Carolina and Houston. So it's in Carolina. Bryce will get the little leg up there with the home game, but we get to see these two guys battle it out. I have a feeling I know which way it's going to go, but we'll see.
You need Bryce Young to fall into a San Francisco 49er situation, or like a Philadelphia Eagles situation, a Cincinnati Bengals situation, even Charger situation. He needs those 2 dominant receivers that he can just pepper all game. You can find your safety valves from the tight ends and the running backs, but he needs those guys that are physical, can get open, catch radius, all that kind of stuff. Shout out to Adam Thielen, man. Just cruising. Perfect buy in Dynasty because anybody who's had Adam Thielen hasn't been able to get anything for him the last 2 years. So, I just got him for a third and a piece in one of my
Thielen and Mostert. I mean, I had Mostert on a lineup on our roster this offseason. I sold him for like a future third. I was like, anything to get this guy off my team. Achan, is there. They might sign Dalvin Cook. I was like, I got to get this guy out of here. And now I'm seeing Mostert get traded for like 2 seconds. Like, it's such a reminder every single season. I fall victim to this too. In season, when I'm trying to make a push, I'm willing to buy these veterans who in the middle of May on paper seem absolutely disgusting. So honestly, it's a lesson learned for me. Don't sell veteran players in the offseason. Wait until the season. Yes, there's a chance they're Brandon Cooks and you just about could drop them to waivers at this point. But there's a chance you get your Adam Thielens, you get your Raheem Mosterts, and in season you find buyers and you can actually capitalize on that value. So a little lesson learned for me.
So Alex, let's talk about this receiver class now that we've hit on the big 3 QBs. And the point that you make with Mostert, I think, is one that we could apply to Anthony Richardson as well. Like, they have that athleticism to burn. I think Mostert's showing that, right? He's like 33, and even if he's slowing down a little bit, he's still going to be great. But stepping into the rookie receivers, this has been I think, pretty surprising receiver class. You've had a lot of guys that have outperformed any expectations. You've had undersized guys doing well with Tank Dell and now Josh Downs. Josh Downs looking like an every week start, got to be in your lineup, flex, wide receiver 3 territory.
Zay Flowers too.
Zay Flowers is hitting. Pretty much everyone outside of JSN, who's now coming on. He's looking a lot better after the bye week. Classic Pete Carroll, like, got to get him ramped up. Can't get him on the field too early. Classic. We should have seen that coming from a mile away. I can't believe we didn't. At least I didn't for JSN. But everyone outside of Quentin Johnston has seemed to do well. And I even had some hot takes the other day, or saw somebody posting hot takes, that the second round in rookie drafts was actually better than the first round. Because in the second round, you had your Rashee Rice, your Jaden Reed, who's just been on the field constantly. Maybe hasn't had that big boom breakout game yet, but has looked solid, is already on the field for a rookie. He's going to finish in aggregate on the year with something like 800, 900 yards, which people are going to look at and get really excited about in the offseason because he's young. Who else did you have there?
Achan was in the second.
Achan was in the second, but specifically I'm talking about the receivers. But yeah,
Downs,
you're right.
Achan said Downs.
Achan was in the second. I'm pulling up the rookie
Tank Dell.
real quick. Tank Dell was going in like the 4th.
3rd, yeah. I think I got him on waivers in the league.
But yeah, talk to me about the rookie wide receivers while I pull up the full list.
I mean, they've been great. A couple I want to highlight that you mentioned. I mean, there's so many I could talk about. Zay Flowers, as a rookie, first of all, already locked into lineups. He looks like he's going to be legit for a very long time. So
I think he's going to be a league winner this year, man. The way he hasn't had that like 40-point week, definitely a buy in redraft. You're not going to be able to get him in Dynasty.
I've been trying to buy high in Dynasty, and it's impossible. Like, I'd easily give I'd give a lot. I'd give several of these other young guys for Zay Flowers. That's what I've been trying to do, is like package Josh Downs and Rashee Rice and things like. It's just not working. And honestly, you're gonna have to overpay, and I'm gonna have to start throwing in some firsts and things like that if you want Zay at this point. But I want to talk about JSN. I was thinking about this earlier. I think JSN in a lot of ways is this year's Drake London, in the sense that it's taken JSN a few weeks. This week was the first week he flashed without DK Metcalf on the field. But I almost think the situation is just lagging behind the talent for these guys. With Drake London in Atlanta, even last season, we saw flashes of talent. There was nothing to say that Drake London, on the merit of talent, should not have gone where he was going in rookie drafts. It was just a low-volume offense. he was a rookie, etc. And then this year he comes out and posts a goose egg week 1 with 0 points. And like week 1 burns so heavily in fantasy players' minds because that's like the first impression for the season. But Drake London, I mean, I'm going to pull up his numbers here. He's been actually pretty good since week 1. Week 2, he had 6 for 67, a couple down games, but 3 for 28 and a touchdown, 6 for 78, 9 for 125. This past week, 6 for 54 and was inches away from a touchdown. And so Drake London, to me, still looks the part on the field, and he's just waiting for the right situation to come. Of course, that's going to mean a new quarterback and a new offensive system. But when that happens for Drake London, still at 22 years old, he is suddenly going to be a premium asset. So I'm holding Drake London if I have him. If I'm rebuilding, I'm buying lower now than where he was last season. And to me, JSN kind of fits in that same boat, not because the Seattle offense is always incompetent, only sometimes they're incompetent. But right now he's sitting behind Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And when we saw Metcalf out this week, we see JSN flash. He has, 4 receptions and a touchdown. And no, I don't think we can expect that to be the norm this season, but I do expect him to become more and more involved as the season goes on. And Tyler Lockett's days in Seattle, I think after this season, are numbered. So when JSN moves into a situation where he is either the 2, the 1B, the 1, I think he is the talent to me that I've seen. There's been nothing to suggest that he can't be an elite wide receiver. So both Drake London and JSN, I'm willing to buy low right now, or at least lower than they were in the offseason this year when they were drafted, because I think they still have breakout potential. They're both still incredibly young.
I can't wait for them to re-sign Tyler Lockett, and then people go, oh, there goes JSN. He's not going to be able to do anything. That's the buy window on JSN is when and if they re-sign Tyler Lockett, which I think they could do just because he's such a Seattle guy. Pete Carroll does weird stuff, man. The fact that he didn't get JSN on the field above 60% of snaps until after the bye week, that's all you need to know in terms of like his usage. But in terms of his efficiency, it has been there, and I think it's getting better with this wrist injury finally clearing up for JSN. We talked about, we name dropped a lot of guys. Is there anyone for you in that second round range that you want to talk about with like Rashee Rice, Josh Downs, Marvin Mims?
Rashee Rice is great. I think Rashee Rice, you mentioned it. I think even in redraft right now, he is a flex. I know you've flexed him and had some success in redraft leagues. This past week, we finally saw him get his highest snap share of the season. I'm looking at now, 59%, 6 targets, 5 for 60 and a touchdown. And not only does the data back up, a Rashee Rice breakout, we're seeing more involvement, more targets. When he's on the field, he's getting looked at. Patrick Mahomes has said great things about him, but it's just trending the right direction, and he passes the eye test as well. When he's out there, he looks explosive. He looks fast. He looks the part as an NFL wide receiver that can get it done. And with Rashee Rice, I think this season he could be a league winner. We're seeing him trend in the right direction in terms of snaps, in terms of targets, and in this Patrick Mahomes offense, if you have the guy that he's looking for at the end of the season, it's going to be valuable. And I almost think Rashee Rice was suppressed in rookie drafts this past offseason for one reason above all others, and that one reason is Sky Moore. If we had not all just taken the bait a year prior on a second-round receiver in Sky Moore and watched him do absolutely nothing in this complex Chiefs offense, it's crowded, there's no one that's going to emerge, I think he actually would have been going instead of mid to late second, probably late first, if not early second at the latest, because a second-round wide receiver – a second-round wide receiver that has great college production, 6'2", 203, this guy, if Sky Moore never happened, going to the Chiefs with a potential opportunity to be their number 1 wide receiver would have been a late first-round pick. And today, if we're redrafting, I'm not trading Rashee Rice for an early second. There's no way. It's going to take a first-rounder for me to let go of Rashee Rice if he's on my rosters, because who knows what they'll do in the offseason. They could always make a move at the trade deadline. They could bring someone in free agency. But Rashee Rice looks like he is in a prime position to be this number 1 wide receiver and develop into this number 1 wide receiver target for Patrick Mahomes over the next couple of seasons. And if that happens, even with Travis Kelce there, you have a year in, year out wide receiver 2 on your hands with Rashee Rice.
The thing for me with Rashee, and agree with everything you said. He's an ascending asset. I think that first is probably for value, and I would honestly sell him for a first. I think in a lot of formats, especially if I think it could potentially be a mid to early first.
Depends on the roster. I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think you're right, man. Like that's what you're gonna have to pay to get him. And I don't know if I would pay that per se. Here's my concern with Rashee Rice right now is that a lot of his targets, a lot of his receptions are coming against soft zone coverages. He's finding the right place to be, which, I mean, there's something to be said for that. That is a strong ability to have for a fantasy, for a guy that can get on the field, the guy that can be the trusted outlet for Mahomes to throw to. But I'm not sure if we've seen him quite win against man coverage enough for me to get excited about him as like, hey, he could be a wide receiver one. He could be a target magnet. He looks like a clear alpha. I have not seen that yet. Do we know, like, is Rashee Rice Gabe Davis? That's my question. And so there was a time where, hey, Gabe Davis had this borderline breakout season. I don't think he even hit 200 fantasy points at PPR total, but it was like that ascension, right? And it was like, here's a young guy. They need that number two. I think Rashee could end up looking more like Gabe Davis long-term, just based on his profile. He was solid, right? Got the draft capital, but he wasn't like a target magnet in college. He wasn't absolutely dominant in college. He didn't declare early. So there's some things that you could look at, I think, with him that are detractors. And then you add in him being on the Chiefs, Travis Kelce, aging out. And even we saw in the times without Kelce or when Kelce was banged up, the Chiefs have struggled. So I don't think they come into next year going, hey, let's build this offense around Rashee Rice. I don't think that'll ever happen. He's not going to be like a Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams type name ever in his career. I don't believe right now. If he can win a little bit more against man, and now limited sample size, right now he's 46 in the league, 36.8% win rate versus man. So like we have not seen that yet. If he starts to win against man, he's a guy I'll be willing to buy high, just like I did with another guy that I want to talk about with Devon Achane. I'm still going to call him Achane. I think it's so ingrained in my brain, so I'll do my best to say the right name here. But with Achane, man, he's a buy high. After that second week, I said, look, buy him in all formats. Doesn't care if you have to don't care if you have to overpay for him. He's a guy you want to overpay for. And here's the thing with Achane that you can hang your hat on, just like Raheem Mostert, is you will typically know when to start him. Yes, he might be plagued by injuries because he is a little smaller. We're already seeing that now. He came in to camp with an injury, dealt with that, I think he was on the PUP like week 1, something like that, or was a healthy inactive, injured inactive, something like that to start the year. Right now he's back on IR again. Now the Dolphins have had every opportunity to slow roll Achane and get him ramped up because they have been winning. They have been scoring a lot of points, but against these top tier teams, I think they're going to need him. But with Achane, especially in like a best ball format, Alex, and that's why I've been trying to pry Achane from you really since that second week where he went off, because I think he's a guy that is just going to be so good, so efficient. He's so electric, and he's going to have so many big plays, touchdowns, and he can catch the ball that you can get excited. And this was a guy that was really good between the tackles. He's not like a Rachaad White. He's not like Kenneth Gainwell, or even like DeAndre Swift in Detroit, where he can't get it done between the tackles. That's really what Achane's game has been. He's better on the ground as a rusher than people give him credit for, especially if they just look at his size and say, oh, he can't do it because he's not a big body guy. No, that is not the case with Achane. He's perfect fit for Miami, and everyone's talked about that. But he's a guy you want to buy. Buy him right now if you can when he's on IR, and pay up for him, because he's a guy who's going to give you week winning performances for the rest of his career. I think he could have a very similar career to Mostert, where even when he's in his late 20s, he's probably banged up, probably in and out of the IR, probably going to have a wash season or two throughout his career. But all in all, when he's on the field, you're going to know when to plug him in your lineups, and he's going to win you weeks.
I mean, even I agree with everything you said. Even this year in redraft, if you've got a team with Achane that's questionable to make the playoffs, and you can go ahead and buy him and save him for your playoff run, like, he is a league winning type of player for sure. And it's almost like Achane, we thought he was going to be, well, we didn't think this. A lot of people, the negative connotation around him was his size is going to turn him into a Tavon Austin gadget level type player that maybe is great for the Dolphins, but doesn't really have that fantasy relevance. But what we're seeing is that he has that playmaker ability of these Tavon Austins, these Ray McLeods, these guys that we've seen in the league that just randomly pop for a big play, these Jamal Agnews. Yet he's so good as an actual running back and a receiver that he's getting a regular workload with that kind of elite athleticism and playmaking ability, which we've never seen from these guys in the past, at least not very frequently. So when you have that playmaking ability and you're getting 10 to 12 carries a game and you're getting looked at in the passing game 4, 5, 6 times, like chances are you are going to pop one of those for a big play, for a touchdown. And through 3 weeks of the Devon Achane experience, he's 3 for 3 on popping at least one, but we've seen multiple big plays every single week. So yes, he is this boom bust type of guy that's not going to be a volume play. Most weeks he's only going to get 10 to 12 touches, but with a guy like him getting 10 to 12 touches, chances are he's going to make 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 big plays, and it's going to have huge returns for your rosters. And having one guy like this in your lineup can win you a week on his own. So huge buy in Dynasty. Agree with everything you said. And when we look at this Dolphins roster, like behind Achane right now, or in front of Achane, next to Achane, whatever we want to say, it's Raheem Mostert and it's Jeff Wilson and it's Savon Ahmed. And it's like, even for this year, we're saying he's a smash buy. What could possibly happen in Miami to make Achane irrelevant in the backfield? And I don't think there's much. I think if anything, his opportunity share is going to go up as we move into the future instead of down.
Yeah, can't wait for Miami to draft another day 2 running back this year and everyone to run out to, Achane's toasted, just like they did with Kenneth Walker. And then we're going to be screaming to buy Achane in all formats. And then what do you know? We see what happens with Kenneth Walker this year. Shout out to me on all of the Kenneth Walker shares that I have. I think he's my number 1 most owned player because people were just fading him because of Zach Charbonnet.
Dude, redraft. I got him in like the 5th round across a ton of leagues. I know I sniped you, Steph, in our home league, but Walker was one of the easiest buys of all time, and it's paying off now.
So easy. What other, like, well, there's a couple other rookie receivers that I think we could talk about here, but can we just we have to do this, Alex. We have to. I think it's a contractual obligation for anyone that makes a podcast about the NFL or talks about it. Puka Nacua.
Oh my gosh. How could we not even mention his name until 45 minutes in? It's unbelievable.
It's just because it's like counting with 0 is implied. When you count 1 to 10, it's like 0. It's just there. Puka's there. We don't have to say him. He's the number 0. Yeah. We know he's there, and he's the best.
Yeah, Puka, I mean,
20.8 fantasy points per game right now, man.
I made a move. I thought I was selling high on Puka, and I traded Puka Nacua, Sam Laporta, and Garrett Wilson for Jamar Chase. And this was like after week 3, and I'm thinking, okay, Garrett Wilson definitely is a premium asset, but this is a contending roster, and I'll throw in Laporta, who's flashed. I think he's going to be a great tight end, but I'll kind of like sell high. And then Puka, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen with this dude, so I'll go ahead and sell him. And honestly, I felt so good about that trade at the time. And now I'm sitting here like, should I be regretting this move? And it's like, yes, I got Jamar Chase, so I can't be upset. But Puka Nacua has defied the laws of physics. He's defied the laws of gravity. He's defied the laws of the NFL. And what he is doing right now, I can't even wrap my head around. And even in redraft leagues, I have him in our home league stuff. And I was talking to a guy in our league about a trade for Devontae Adams. I was like, I don't even know that I would trade him for Devontae Adams straight up. And it's unbelievable. So I think just right now, even with Cooper Kupp back, we're seeing it's a target funnel that's going to 2 players. And there's going to be, the way I read the situation is there's going to be Puka Nacua weeks. There's going to be Cooper Kupp weeks. And there's going to be weeks where it's both when the Rams have a big passing output. So that's kind of the short-term outlook. I think as we think about dynasty and long-term, I don't know if this is an Amon-Ra St. Brown situation where it was kind of like this later drafted rookie was in a funnel situation, and it's kind of like withstood the test of time because Amon-Ra's situation was super insulated. The coaching staff was there. The quarterback was there. The only fear was maybe they bring in more guys that can, kind of like disperse the funnel. But in LA, what happens if Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Sean McVay are all gone this offseason? The system is completely different. Like, is Puka a function of the system, or is he actually just like this dude that's going to be commanding targets for his whole career? I think he probably falls somewhere in the middle. So for Dynasty, I'm not valuing him as highly as some others are right now as like a top 10 asset, but he's a wide receiver too for me in Dynasty. I'd probably put him. I mean, here's a couple questions for Steph, like Puka or T. Higgins in Dynasty, because for me, I think I'm taking Puka.
Yeah, well, that's I love that question because I'm also down on T. Higgins, and I think that's a guy that we need to talk about as well. But
like those are the decisions, though. Like you have to kind of call your shot with Puka right now and say, do I trade him and try to get one of these guys that I know has the talent and maybe is disappointed? Or do I want to actually buy Puka or hold Puka and maybe have something for the long term? So it's an anomaly.
So yeah, I have some strong takes on Puka, and you're right. Definitely a guy you call your shot on, especially in redraft. Here's what I think happened with Puka. Okay, he fell really far, right? Obviously, shouldn't have been a 5th round. He's like the 543 if you look at his draft capital. So like a late 5th round pick, pretty much a 6th. He's good. He's good. He's winning against man coverage consistently. But he's also buoyed by the situation, right? He's buoyed by Stafford first and foremost. Like before we even talk about McVay and the scheme and the offense and all that kind of stuff, Stafford is insane, man. Like I guess people were worried about the back injury over the offseason, and that was kind of the narrative of like, okay, Stafford's washed. He was hurt last year. He's going to be hurt this year. They're tanking. But no, McVay came back. Sean Stafford's elite. Honestly,
Stafford looks good. Yeah,
he
Stafford
has been elite for the last decade plus. That doesn't just disappear overnight, even if he is playing through a back injury. And like we haven't seen the fantasy points from Stafford necessarily, but he's been very, very good. Tight window throws, deep shots.
Stafford has 7 touchdowns in 7 games, which tells me if we start to see that get back to the mean of where this offense should be outputting and no Kyron Williams 2 touchdowns a week. Like if Stafford starts throwing 2 touchdowns a week instead of 1, we're going to see Puka and Cooper Kupp production get even higher, which feels impossible, but it's going to happen.
Yes. Well, here's what I'd say with Puka. I think he's a low-end wide receiver 2 in Dynasty, but he's being treated like a low-end wide receiver 1, and so that's where the edge is. So if you can get out on Puka to 100%. Go buy low on a guy like Devonta Smith, if you can go buy, like I've seen Puka ahead of DK Metcalf consistently, and I just think that's way wrong. I would sell Puka for DK.
I'll take Smith. I'll take Waddle. But I think I would take the shot on Puka over T. Higgins. I don't like what I've seen out of T. Higgins lately. So that's kind of where the line is for me. I take him over Pittman. It's kind of like that tier is where the break is. But
interesting. Puka over crazy. Pittman.
Yeah, I would take Puka over Pittman.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that'll be a good test for Puka is what happens over the next couple of years. And I think a lot of dynasty processes are going to be proven wrong and a lot are going to be proven right. But having him right now, like I'm a look at Keep Trade Cut, which we know is obviously a fraudulent website. Don't use it for your rankings. Just don't fall into the trap of using Keep Trade Cut because it's all hot takes, overreactionary to the last 3 weeks. But right now, you're seeing Puka as the wide receiver 10 above Stephon Diggs, above Devonta Smith, above Zay Flowers, above Jordan Addison.
Absurd. If someone in your league values him like that, go make a trade right now.
He's just below. Like right now, according to Keep Trade Cut, he's in the same tier as Jalen Waddle and Chris Olave right now.
That's wrong.
So, like, people think, because I go into the Discord and I say, sell Puka in all formats, they think I hate Puka. No, I think Puka's actually good. I think Puka's a good player. I think he'll be a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. You know, get him in the right situation, he can be a wide receiver 1, but he'll regress to the mean eventually. I don't think he can sustain what he's doing right now unless he's literally going to be like the next Jerry.
The only hope for him, I think, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the last, 4, I don't remember what it was. It was like 4, 5, or 6 games of his rookie season showed us what Puka has showed us through 7 games. And I sold Amon-Ra St. Brown that offseason. The hype was through the roof. I had him in a couple of leagues, sold him, got great returns for him. So even now, like those trades look fine. But Amon-Ra St. Brown actually continued what he started, and that's the hope for Puka. I think if Puka's the next Amon-Ra St. Brown, yeah, he is a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. I don't think he is. I think he's somewhere close, but he's not quite to that level to me. So I think we're in agreement here. He's not a top 10 guy, but he's in the top 20 for sure.
The Amon-Ra comp that you throw out is perfect. And I think another guy that fell into that too is Brandon Ayuk. People were like, oh, there was no Debo rookie year. Remember Kittle was hurt that year?
Yep.
Right? Like everyone looked at that and said, oh, he was inflated about the situation. It's still hard to win against top tier cornerbacks in the NFL consistently. And so when you see a guy doing it for this long, at first, like 2 or 3 weeks in, I was like, there's no way he keeps this up. There's no way he keeps this up with Cooper Kupp back. I've seen the Travis Fulghams before. I'm not falling for this. And then after 4, 5, 6 weeks, it's like, okay, like he's here to stay. And I think he can, whether you want to comp him to like Robert Woods, like a young Robert Woods, I've seen that a lot. And I think that's fine. Really, to me, that just says, look, he's a good possession receiver. He's going to get open consistently. He's not going to juke anybody's shoes. He's not going to be a yak monster. But if he can just get open consistently, I think he's going to be good in the league for a long time. Obviously, the elite QB and the situation helps. George Pickens or Puka right now?
Oh my gosh. Man.
Because you have Pickens in the worst situation, but better player. Puka, probably the worst player, as far as we can say on paper, worst player, but better situation.
I think I'd go Puka, but it's so close, dude. Pickens every single week makes multiple plays that I'm like, this dude is legit. And I get it. People are worried about the separation or whatever. But first of all, he's been open on plenty of his big plays this season. And second of all, you throw to this guy for a contested catch, and it feels like George Pickens always makes the catch. Like, it's unbelievable. So get George Pickens to 8 to 10 targets a game. It would be insane. But I'd still go with Puka for now. Even though I love Pickens, I love what I've seen out of him.
Love it. So it's like we both like Puka. We think he's good, but he's still a sell high at the moment. Which, I mean,
absolutely,
as you would expect from regressing the mean, we could have said the same thing about Brock Purdy. And then now look at the last 2 games of Brock Purdy. He's getting memed on. I actually think he's probably a buy low. But that's all it takes, right? For a guy that isn't this high brand equity dynasty name that was a first-round pick. They can be dominant for 8 weeks, but the second they have 2 down games, everybody wants to come.
Thank goodness Puka week 7 against Pittsburgh, 8 for 154, because that prior week with Cooper Kupp back, 4 for 26. It was 7 targets, but if he would have had another down game or 2 more down games consecutively, that value is going to plummet even in the short term. So, the targets, 10 targets a game with Cooper Kupp back, like, it's here to stay for this season for sure. But yeah, we're in agreement there.
Who else in this class? I mean, are there a couple of busts? I mean, do we want to say? I'm ready to say QJ's a bust. Like, 100%. And that's one of the things that people. There's a nuance to this, y'all. And like, yes, we can have our pre-draft takes, but once you see new information, you adapt. And I see people throwing it in my face. Oh, you were out on QJ. Take your L on QJ. Yeah, after week 3, I was out on QJ. So, and I have no shares of QJ. So, I'll just take that a little bit. All right. We were not just dying on these hills for these players. We see new information. If the dude can't get on the field over Joshua Palmer, over Darius Davis, or whoever this guy is, like wide receiver 5 on the chart, he's not good. He can't get open. I thought he was going to be a yak guy that they were going to give him manufactured touches. It hasn't happened. They don't trust him. He can't catch. The drops were a problem in school. I said, look, I don't want to overreact to drops. I think he can get better and develop that part of his game. But what he did with yak in college, no. Okay, my takeaway from that is, look, yak in college is really not something that you should look at, honestly. I think target shares matter way more because it's so easy for a program like TCU to play nobodies for 7 weeks of the year, and now it's an inflated yak sample size for QJ where, or even against like Michigan, it was like 2 for 150 yards. It's like people fell down every time they threw QJ the ball on these slants and took to the house. So all the QJ detractors were correct. So I'll admit that. I'm not going to take the L on it because I have no shares. Okay, I will scrap the call against every single L that y'all want to give.
I fell into a couple QJ shares and it sucks. Like it's not a great.
Sell them for a third. I mean, what are you going to get?
No, you just got to hold. You just got to hold and say your prayers. But honestly, looking at this class, it's been great for a class that was talked about in such a negative light, talked about to be so top heavy across the board. Like, there's been some guys that are disappointing. Bryce Young's been disappointing. I wouldn't label him a bust yet. He still has a chance. QJ is the one that's been disappointing and I don't give much of a chance, but Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, I mean, great. I think JSN, we're starting to turn the corner. Even like the tight ends, Laporta, amazing. Kincaid,
let's talk about the tight ends.
Kincaid, we'll see. Mayer, we've seen flashes from. Even Musgrave, who was taken in the 3rd round in a lot of places, has looked awesome. And then into the 2nd, it's like you got Achane, you got Mingo, who's at least on the field getting targets, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Josh Downs. Like, you got a lot of really good players in this range. I think Mingo is the receiver that has disappointed the most. I don't like what I've seen from him, especially with Bryce Young not really pushing the ball down the field. But a lot of these mid to late 2nd, even early 3rd round wide receivers have flashed. And the only guys really throughout the draft that haven't produced, I still think, have a chance, if that makes sense. Like, I think Tank Bigsby's been disappointing. He's probably the one that I would pick out of this group. Yeah, there it is. Tank Bigsby makes me sick. But like Roshan, Kendre Miller, even Charbonnet, like super disappointing, but I wouldn't say there's any reason for us to think that they suck just yet. We'll give them a chance and see what happens if they get an opportunity.
Yeah, who are your certified busts? Because I think
Certified
QJ's a
bust,
certified bust.
QJ. Certified bust, I think Tank Bigsby. Certified bust.
Wow, you don't think Bigsby? Like, I think he can still be a fine grinder.
Maybe.
Which is
Certified
I guess
bust.
it comes back down to this, right? Because we're putting this in context of where we had them in the draft and what we thought about them during the process. I always thought Bigsby was because he didn't catch the ball in college. I just thought, okay, he can be a solid grinder back in the league. Maybe gets some receiving work in the right situation where he's a team's RB1. Okay, now he's there behind ETN. So as long as ETN's healthy, he's not do much in the passing. I just thought he was a grinder back, but he would be fine on the ground as a rusher. But he can't even get on the field. So I mean, yeah, if you want to say bust,
I didn't take him anywhere, but I saw him go mid-second, like ahead of Jaden Reed, Sam Laporta. It's all about opportunity cost, I guess, ahead of Rashi Rice. I'd say there's a couple, D-Rid, Cedric Tillman, certified bust. Yes, he was taken at the third round, like most places I saw. I think there's a lot of third rounders like that just aren't going to get the opportunity. Keishon Butte, tough scene. Xavier Hutchinson's not getting on the field. A lot of these late names we like.
Hey, Zay started getting on the field. He got a jet sweep the other day.
He's third, fourth round picks. Like if they play, that is good. Like you can't be a bust if you're playing, if you in the third or fourth round of rookie drafts. I think there's a couple guys that are like towing the line of a certified bust. I'd say it's Bryce Young, Charbonnet, Will Levis, Mingo.
Levis gets the start this week.
Mingo, Chase Brown, certified bust, but he was a third rounder. So there's a lot of these guys that like have been disappointing. They still have a chance. But honestly, for the most part, weren't a ton of landmines in this draft.
Yeah, I'm willing to say bust with Mingo, but that's because also I didn't like Mingo at all.
Yeah.
What about Trey Palmer? You excited for him?
He's shown a little bit. I mean, it's tough with these guys. Like, do I think he could carve out a big enough role to be super fantasy relevant? Like, I don't know.
Will it surprise you at all?
Maybe he's an Isaiah McKenzie. Like,
okay. I don't mind that comp, honestly. What do you think? Like, is it? Would you be surprised, or what would your level of shock be if Mike Evans is hurt for the last 5 weeks of the year and Trey Palmer comes in and just replaces Mike Evans' production?
I'd be so shocked.
Really? Okay. So you don't think the talent's there, the ability's there, even with the opportunity clearing up?
Not for that kind of role. I think he could carve out a good number 3 role, and in the right offense at some point that features 3 wide receivers, he could be a flex type of guy. But to put up any kind of consistency as a feature guy in an offense, I don't see it yet.
What about Jalen Hyatt?
I didn't want to. I guess he's one that was kind of towing the line of certified bust for a while, but these last couple weeks, he's been more involved. He's been playing more snaps. He's getting targets down the field. He's made some pretty nice catches, but I still think with Hyatt, unfortunately, he's just playing the role of a field stretcher. Like the hope for Hyatt is probably that he just becomes the next Darius Slayton, and it's like, what is that really giving you?
You don't think that can change? Kind of like because I will say this. And this goes back to trust your process, trust our initial evaluations on these guys, dude. We've been so right, but it just takes 2-3 years for us to be right on certain names, whether it's ETN, whether it's George Pickens. But same thing happened with George Pickens, where rookie year, he was seen as this stretch Z. Like, yes, they would put him out at X, but they would also slide in Deontay out wide. And it was always George Pickens, just we're going to throw you a moonshot and hope for the best. And he'd be able to do it because George Pickens is just that good. But then what do you see? Deontay Johnson goes down. They start using Pickens all over the field more. They're moving him around the formation, and he's great. So, like, is that something that you see with Jalen Hyatt where they move him around more?
Maybe. If so, it's going to take a while. I mean, the difference for me, even looking at Pickens' rookie season, he was getting a full allotment of snaps. I mean, he was 70, 80, 90% of snaps every single week. He was getting targeted a lot of games with 6, 7, 8 targets throughout his whole rookie season. And Hyatt right now, it's like, his snap share has been up the last 2 games. So that's the good thing. 70% or higher last 2 weeks, but it's turned into 2 for 75 and like 3 for 21, 2 for 89. I think my fear is that he becomes a player that is literally the Marquez Valdez Scantling. Like you hope maybe he gets a game where he gets 5 or 6 targets, but you just hope he hits the big one. And maybe you can flex him every now and then in the right matchup. But for him to become a guy that's commanding consistent targets every single week, I haven't seen it yet. I had some concerns with that coming into the draft. I do have some shares though. I got him in the 301, 302 range in a couple of leagues. So I want to see more. I want to see if he
Would you
can
sell him
develop
just for a second, straight up right now?
Yeah, I would for sure.
Yeah, I think
I would
that's where we're
re-roll.
at.
I want to see him develop his route tree a little bit and get open in the middle range of the field, even maybe some screens. Hopefully the Giants start designing some manufactured touches for him. But if he's just going to continue running wind sprints and catch one or two of them a game, like it's not it. So we'll see. But for where you got him, I mean, early third round, we're seeing something at least.
I'm going to throw out this statement, and I think you'll agree with it. Wan'Dale Robinson, rest of career over Jalen Hyatt.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Wan'Dale's nice.
Yeah, we like Wan'Dale. Shout out to our boy Derek. Shout out to everybody in the chat right now. If you're still with us, throw a question there. Throw out a player.
Yeah, let's hit some questions. I know we're at an hour and 5. I got a meeting coming up, but I got like 15 more minutes, 10, 15 more minutes. If we want to hit some questions, we'll see how many we get and use our time. But let's hit on this. If you're
still rocking with us and you're not from the Discord, I think anybody watching is probably from the Discord. But if you're not, hop in there, join the conversation with us, start sit questions, post your trades. We'll help you out. We got a whole group of sharps. And what I love about it is we all have slightly different approaches to the game, so you get some different opinions. It's not just an echo chamber, even though most of the time I'm right. But Tyjae Spears is the name that Derek wanted us to talk about. And with the Derrick Henry trade rumors, he's definitely a timely name in dynasty circles. I love Tyjae from what we've seen. I think he's just a guy that you have to say, like, I really only want him for his rookie contract, just with like the ACL and knee history and all that kind of stuff. But I think he can be good for 3 years, and that's probably all you're looking for from a guy that you could probably get for a second-round pick right now.
Buy him today. Like, I'd buy him right now. Redraft dynasty, I think with the Henry trade rumors, for people that aren't as sharp, they might not factor that in or think it's unlikely. So if you can buy him today with one outcome is, hey, he becomes the certified starter for the rest of the season. B, even if he doesn't, even if Derrick Henry stays on this team, I mean, Tyjae Spears is playing 50+% of snaps every single week. He's getting a handful of carries. He's getting 4 or 5 targets. Like, this is a player you can start. He is Jaylen Warren on the Titans. So, like, if you can get him, I'd say get him. And if Henry leaves, it's just some upside. So I agree. I think 3-year window for him is absolutely in play.
Do you think Levis could be a little bit of a chuck down boy to get started?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There it is. Okay. Yeah. So we're in on Tyjae. I feel like he's a perfect value accrual play. Get him right now for a second, let his value go up and try to flip him into like a second plus or even like a late first once we get into the depth of the season. Somebody is a running back. Tyjae's the starter.
Tyjae, Jaylen Warren.
Oh, I'm smashing Tyjae, 1,000%.
What about redraft? Tyjae or Jaylen Warren?
Oh, I'd probably still go Tyjae.
I agree.
Yeah, just because I think we've seen more as a receiving weapon, and he's younger and all that. So, great question here from our boy Conk. Shout out to Conk. What do we think about the Chuba and Sanders situation? I have a lot of strong opinions on this. I think Sanders just isn't good anymore.
Sanders sucks.
Yeah, he's just not good anymore. He's gotten older. Kind of never lived up to the standards that like people like I had for Sanders as what he could be as essentially a Saquon Barkley light, seeing as they both came from Penn State, both showed a lot in their college careers through the air specifically. I thought that's where Sanders would be great. And pretty much ever since there was that like second or third Carson Wentz year where they pretty much phased Sanders out of the passing game completely, had a lot of bad drops and crunch time situations with Carson Wentz throwing hero balls back into the end zone. Sanders couldn't bring them down. It was like, okay, like you're getting relegated, buddy. And that was a big part of his game. Yes, he can be an efficient runner, but I don't want him in Dynasty.
Miles Sanders is Najee Harris, but 2 years older.
Oh, no, I think Sanders has more juice still, which isn't saying much. Which is not saying much at all. But I do like Chuba. I think Chuba's a guy that I actually really like him on contending rosters right now because you just know when to plug him in. If Sanders is out, then okay, Chuba's going to have your 15+ fantasy points.
I think redraft and dynasty, Chuba's a nice little buy, and you use the hey, Sanders has been hurt, Chuba's been getting a big workload in your favor, and say, oh, with Sanders back, like I just want him as like a handcuff stash, whatever. But I think it's going to be a split. I think Chuba's looked way better. He's getting the passing work, and I'm with you. If you need bye-week fill-in, you need someone, if Sanders misses more time, that can be a pretty confident start. Like, I'm in.
And once Chuba does, let's say, get the workload, then I think he's like once he is, on everybody's radar as the RB1 in Carolina, I think you sell him because one, he's already 24. Yep.
And they're going to bring someone else in. Yeah.
They're probably going to bring someone else in. And you add in the fact that he really like, yes, he's getting the receiving role, but it's not like he's some target magnet as a weapon. His best receiving game since he's joined the league, like he had some 6-target inefficient games as a rookie. Last year didn't have a game above 3 targets. And then this year he had the 1 game week 2 against New Orleans, 5 for 5. And really hasn't done much else as a receiver. He had the 19 carries, 4.63 yards per carry against Miami in a losing game script. So, and he only had 1 target for 1 reception in the game. So I don't think he's some like stud 3-down workhorse monster. You and I liked Chuba, I think, coming out because he had that 2,000-yard rushing season in college. We thought, hey, this guy's looks pretty good. He's an Olympic track runner. Like he's an electric player. Then just kind of got shelved in tough depth charts and in the draft. But definitely sell him if somebody thinks they're getting like the next Achane or the next Tony Pollard with Chuba, definitely sell off of that if you can.
Steph, we had a question earlier about, I can't believe I'm about to say this name, Leonard Fournette. It says, if he signs, do we think he makes an impact if he goes to Kansas City, Cincinnati? You worried about that at all? I'm not. I think he's washed. I think he will sign somewhere and people are going to overreact and he's just going to be irrelevant. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, he'll probably go somewhere, have like 2 good games. He'll do like what Kareem Hunt's doing right now, but probably a little worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey guys, remember at one point Le'Veon Bell signed with the Chiefs. Just so everybody remembers that. Do you remember that?
No. Actually, no, I do. I had him. I traded him for something.
Yeah. That was that was a window. That was just a window of anything where you can just get a transaction done. Just do something. Get $20 a fab for him.
Steph, I want your take real quick. We'll give it another minute and see if any more questions roll in. But Tyson Bagent, what's up with this guy? Is he anything? Is there a shot that he's their quarterback for the rest of the year? He looked good.
Oh goodness.
He looked good. He had a better game than Bryce Young has had all season.
Oh man. That's damning. Oh, Bryce is a bust. Oh, it hurts.
I mean, this dude in his first start, 21 for 29, 162 yards and a touchdown, adds 3 for 24 on the ground. So super efficient. He's not pushing the ball down the field, but you can't expect him to.
To me, all this really means is they're going to have plenty of time for Fields to heal up. That to me is what it looks like. Let's talk about Fields from a dynasty perspective. I've seen he's pretty polarizing. A lot of people saying he sucks, get rid of him, sell him for anything. A lot of other people, like myself, are more on the side of, hey, I think he's actually just really good. Maybe we see some situational turmoil, but wherever he lands, you give him enough games, he's going to produce for fantasy. And what we've seen the last 2 weeks before the injury with Justin Fields is the Justin Fields. Like the efficient passer. He's had a beautiful deep ball completion percentage. Obviously, we know what he can do as a rusher. I think those 28 for 35, maybe that's a little bit inflated. The Denver game was obviously right about this.
And then the next week, passing was a little bit suspect. I mean, he had the 4 touchdowns, which is great. You can't hate on the guy for 15 for 29, 282 and 4. He's pushing down the field. That was the DJ Moore game.
He's your classic like 220-yard passer a game where he's more in like the low 60 completion percentage. Like he's a worse Lamar essentially. But
pull up D-Rid's comment here. Really I think that took the words out of my mouth. Like I don't know that Fields.
You don't think he's good for real life?
No, I don't. I think he's fun. I think he's too inconsistent to be the face of a franchise. He has these pop games, but more often than not, he's disappointing. They're losing. But I think similar to the Kyler conversation from earlier, like if he is not starting for the Bears, I do think he will be starting somewhere for at least the next 3 or 4 seasons, unless the wheels absolutely fall off like they did for Cam Newton late in his career. But Fields is still young, hopefully is still progressing as a passer. And we're not trying to build NFL rosters here. We're not GMs. That would be fun, but we're not. Like we're trying to win dynasty leagues, and Fields puts up points. So similar to Kyler, like whether we think he's a good NFL quarterback or not, if these rushing quarterbacks are starting in the NFL, they need to be premium assets in dynasty. So with Fields, I think it's just the risk is he a backup after this season? That's the risk. And if someone's worried about that risk, I'm willing to buy low. I bought low on Trey Lance. I sent like a late second in 2025 for Trey Lance. That's like these rushing quarterbacks, if they ever get a shot, they can be started in your lineup. So if you can ship off, late picks, other positions that might have flashed and get Justin Fields, I think it's worth it.
So here, there'll be some interesting open landing spots next year. Let's just say that Fields ends up on a tanking roster again next season, but gives you the fantasy product. I guess how bad do you think? Because here's what I think Fields can be. I'm not telling anybody he's going to be a franchise starter for the next 10 years or that he deserves to get a record-breaking contract. But can he be a guy that starts for a couple of different teams? When he's on the field, he's giving you electric production and winning you weeks? Yes, and that's why I want him. So, yeah, face of the franchise. I don't think anybody's saying that. I haven't seen even Bears, the most delusional Bears fan, still thinks Fields is not the future of the franchise or any franchise. So I don't think that's a debate worth having here. So I'm still in on Fields. I think he's a buy, honestly, especially for rebuilders. He's going to land somewhere next year. Like, let's say he goes to Atlanta next year. They're essentially, okay, we'll upgrade Desmond Ridder. That would be a huge win for Justin Fields because now he's loaded with weapons all around him. Let's say he goes to Tampa next year where, Mike Evans is gone. They're kind of mid, rebuild, trying to hold on, kind of like the Saints have. Could you see something like that for Fields? And
it'd be great.
Be interested in him as a worth a first-round dynasty.
It'd be great. You're right. There's so many landing spots. The ones you mentioned, Patriots would be interesting. I don't know. Seattle. Geno Smith has looked kind of mid this year, and he's getting older. There's a lot of things that are going to happen before next season. I think Fields is going to be a starter for the rest of this year when he's healthy, for next year at least. And if you can get that production for even a 2-year window, I'm taking that over a Brock Purdy. I'm taking that over these guys that are plug-ins trying to hold the line. I want guys that are going to win me a league. And Fields, I think at minimum, you're getting an upside quarterback for the rest of this year next, maybe longer, hopefully longer. So yeah, he's a buy.
Last question here, and then I want to throw some just victory laps, Alex. That'll be our question to end on. So I'll let that mull around in your brain a little bit. What do you feel like, this season has gone right for you? But quick question from our boy, Jim Jean. Appreciate you hanging with us. Appreciate everybody who's been following along today. Again, hit up that Discord if you're not in it already. Would you sell Mahomes in a 14-team single QB rebuild league if you have A-Rich on the bench? Depends what you can get for Mahomes, but in a 14-team league, if you can get multiple every week starters, I think that's probably worth it, and you can piece it together with A-Rich and some other names. It really depends. This is really nerdy, but it depends on what level of investment you want to have in the league. If you're like, hey, I don't want to look at the quarterback spot, I'm not grinding waivers, I'm not constantly making deals, no one really moves assets a lot in this league, and it's a pretty stiff market, then yeah, hold on to Mahomes just because of the security that he gives you, and then sell Anthony Richardson for something that you can get next year. Versus if it's a league where, hey, there's a lot of transactions going on, a lot of people going, into full rebuild, a lot of people going into heavy contention, and I think there's value to be had here, then take advantage. So it's one of those things, know your league, but I can tell you in 14-team leagues, even having a starting running back and a receiver, let's say you get, I don't know, Devonta Smith and DeAndre Swift for Mahomes, I would probably do that in a 1 QB.
See, I wouldn't. It would take more than that for me.
What would it have to take for you? He's rebuilding, so keep that in mind as well.
I think replace Swift with a Jahmyr Gibbs.
Gibbs, yeah, that's the perfect name.
And I think I'm starting to get on board, yeah, especially in the 1 QB. But any draft picks you trade for, especially in a 14-team 1 QB, got to be top 3. Or got to be top 3.
Yeah.
So
that's the one thing I hate. I despise about 14-team dynasties is that it hurts the rookie draft values a lot. Because then if it's anything that's mid to late, people just hate that pick.
Especially 1 QB. I mean, it's a QB class. There could be 5-6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round this year. So you're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. There's a couple other good receivers in the class as well. I know it's from a running back perspective. There's no Bijan in this class. So yeah, it's got to be early. But
okay, Alex, give us your. We'll get out of here on this. Do you have 1 or 2 takes that you just feel like have just delivered and are winning you leagues and have just you dominated this redraft season or even dynasty?
Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, that has to be
Kenneth
the one, right?
Walker, I mean, bought him everywhere that I could, drafted him in redraft in the 5th, 6th round. Like, it was crazy. And I think too, just like elite tight end, like Travis Kelce. No, I don't think he was necessarily a first round value in redraft leagues, but in a couple dynasty contenders, I've actually paid up and bought Travis Kelce, knowing that he's going to give me a couple more years of production. And like, that's paid off in spades. Like, there's a league where I traded Jordan Love in a late, probably it's going to be the 111 or the 112 in the 2024 draft. And I picked up Travis Kelce on a contending team. And it's like, this guy is still full steam ahead, and he's going to help me win leagues. And he's probably going to play for a couple more seasons and be at that elite level. So it's almost like redraft. There's a couple players like Kenneth Walker that have been fantastic. And then in Dynasty, it's like a lesson learned. I feel like I hit on this earlier where it's like, you have these dusty veterans in the off seasons, the Thielens, the Raheem Mosterts, and if you sell them in the off season, you get nothing. But I also think it's like, be willing to trade for win now pieces in the regular season and to pay up for them. I know Travis Kelce is a good example. I think Dak Prescott is another example. Steph, I know on some rebuild teams, you're trying to sell him. I think that makes total sense. But on contending teams like Dak Prescott, he's 30, 31 years old, and he's still going to be a startable quarterback and a good second quarterback on your roster in dynasty leagues for a couple seasons. So if you have the opportunity to buy these veterans that are going to help you in leagues, I just think it's worth investing as long as you see a 2 to 3 year window for that player. So, yeah, I'm contending in every league right now, which is fun. So I think we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, very nice.
What about you? What do you got for me? I know ETN's a big one. I mean,
so Alex, let me blow your mind here real quick with a stat. Christian McCaffrey and Travis Etienne have the same amount of touches this year.
That's not true. Tell me the real stat.
Etienne
feels unbelievable.
Etienne is less than 100 yards behind McCaffrey rushing. And now McCaffrey has him in the passing game. Fine. But the difference right now is less than 5 points between them on a points per game basis. ETN is delivering in spades exactly what I was pounding the table for in that 2020 draft. Get out of here with your Najee Harris. I had people telling me, like, take him behind Kyle Pitts, take him behind even Devontae Williams. Get out of here. I had to sit through with that Liz Frank year where everyone told me that I was just wrong. Oh, ETN's a bust. He's hurt. He's never going to get healthy. He lost all his explosiveness. He's never going to be able to. And then last year, never going to be able to catch passes. He's not a receiver. He can't get more than 3 in a game. And then week 1 comes out with a 5 for 5. Feels phenomenal. All you Najee truthers, all you ETN haters, get out of here. The other one, my boy Conk beat me to it. And this is back to your point on the dusty veterans, man. Alvin Kamara in the 7th was the smash of all smashes. This year you had. And it's like clockwork. I feel like this happens every single year where you hit the narratives right before the season starts, and then you see the value suppression. We had it this year with Cooper Kupp going on IR to start the year. We had it with Jonathan Taylor with all the trade rumors and all that kind of stuff. We had it with there was somebody out, Alvin Kamara, obviously. There were a couple other ones that were in there, but this was the year. I think this is going to be my approach pretty much every year, unless there's some massive changes, is either hero or zero RB. I think the approach I took in redrafts was either Christian McCaffrey, hero running back at the 102, or Bijan Robinson and build around him. So I have a team where I started Bijan Kelce, and that team is doing really, really well somehow, some way. So this was, I think, the year to avoid running backs early, where we have DeAndre Swift hitting. We have who I have a lot of shares of because of that approach. We had Kenneth Walker falling to egregious levels. Even guys like Ramondre Stevenson falling to like late 3rd, early 4th round in redraft was an area that I felt really good about drafting those running backs. There were a couple landmines in there. Certainly there were a couple landmines. But even like Breece Hall was a good one. Dobbins and Pierce were really the 2 landmines. Rachaad White, we can say he's been fine enough that he's not tanking your roster because you're probably loaded everywhere else.
Yeah, White and Mixon have kind of been questionable.
Mixon in that range too. So yeah, fade first round running back unless it's CMC, probably Bijan for the next couple of years. But guys, appreciate y'all rocking with us. Give us a like, tell your friends about the show, get in that Discord. drop your topics in the Discord. We want to batch up a lot of these topics. You can tell we're more just riffing these days as opposed to coming in with essays written about
Yeah,
each
I don't
player.
got time for that.
But I think that's a better approach anyways. So appreciate y'all rocking with us, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace.